Thank you very much, Claude. Good afternoon, everybody. I must admit that after this last panel, I am a little bit depressed because we heard, the difficulties the financiers, who are in a way the masters of this world, have in making nuclear financeable. Even though I have a personal experience of having worked on two big nuclear projects which were not successful in the end for reasons in part actually explained by the preceding speakers. In my short introduction, I will have the members of this panel will participate virtually. So with a very large time difference. Some of them are in China, some in the US, early morning or late afternoon in China. So I will make just a short introduction, and again, in the introduction, I will probably repeat some of the messages or arguments that were made in the previous sessions. In my mother tongue, the Czech language, there is a proverb which says that repetition is the mother of wisdom. I'm not sure that it's really the case, because I think many arguments have been repeated over and over for years and years, and yet the wisdom, if I understand under wisdom some kind of objective physical reality that imposes itself on the way we do things, has had a lot of difficulty to emerge. So we said that creating a level playing field for the development of renewable projects is something the nuclear industry has been calling for many years. And it has been said that it is primarily a question of political will. And such political will has clearly so far been missing in the European Union. And I think we have had many testimonials for that in the previous sessions. And I think that this is really a danger for the future of Europe. Especially if we look at the world today, it seems that Europe, or the European Union, is increasingly isolated in its reluctance to embrace nuclear power. All over the world, advanced economies are developing ambitious strategies in favor of nuclear to provide the necessary energy for their economies and to achieve their goals in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And at the same time, we also see a number of developing countries looking to nuclear power in order to allow their continued economic development without increasing their reliance on fossil fuels. The nuclear industry is still young and has a tremendous potential to satisfy the current and future energy needs of the world, and is the potential not only to satisfy the growing demand for electricity, but also the need for energy for heating, for industrial heat, for clean hydrogen production, to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors of the economy, where I currently see no other alternative whatsoever. So we have the current Generation 3 technology, which is a major topic, let's say, for the coming years. But we have, of course, a lot of discussions about the SMRs, which could complement the Generation 3 reactors and address the energy needs in other sectors. And of course, the Generation 4 that should make nuclear energy sustainable in the long term. The climate change is a global threat. And nuclear energy clearly has the potential to be a major contributor in reducing CO2 emissions across the economy. So in a way, we need a global tool to a global risk. And for that, it is extremely important that nuclear energy, to be developed at a global scale, it requires international cooperation, reinforcement of international and multilateral institutions that are responsible for the development, for safety, regulations, licensing, but importantly, of course, also financing of nuclear projects. Nuclear power is capital intensive and difficult to finance, as we have seen, especially by the very short-term focused private sector. But its societal benefits are huge, and nuclear energy can bring a lot of well-being for populations. So for that, we need public policies. And again, I'm getting back to the political will. They are necessary, and because they can value these benefits that the let's say private financing markets just cannot. It is not in their role to value these benefits. While the European Union seems to be entangled in its internal political and ideological rivalries and contradictions, in other countries and large economies around the world, there is no more debate today. Nuclear is green. This is the case in Canada, in the United States, in the UK, in China, in Russia, India. At the same time, Europe, with its installed nuclear capacity, even in the relatively modest provisions of the European Union, the estimate is that about 400 billion euros will have to be invested just to maintain nuclear between 2050, between now and 2050. It is clear that the international players, nuclear players, are obviously looking at this market and competing in this market. So for that, in a way, they are in a better position because, again, the European players don't have a framework, they don't have a support, they don't have the support of their governments to effectively compete in the market. So today we have the opportunity to have three distinguished speakers, experts, to share with us the approaches and policies developed in their respective countries in favor of nuclear power, in support of financing new nuclear projects in their countries, and also in supporting their industry to export nuclear power plants globally outside of their home markets, and how do they manage the risk-sharing questions in nuclear new builds, let's say questions about developing public-private partnerships, but also supporting innovations and developing new nuclear technologies in their countries. So we will have three speakers, as Claude mentioned. We will have Mr. Ilya Rebrov, who is the Deputy Director General for Economy and Finance of Rosatom, Russia. We will have Mr. Zhang Jinhua, who is the Technical Director at the China Nuclear Power Corporation. And we will have, in this order, John Kotek, who is the Senior Vice President of Policy Development and Public Affairs at the Nuclear Energy Institute in the United States of America. So I hope we have all the speakers with us. So you will have 15 minutes for your presentations, and I hope we will have a little bit time left in the end for some Q&A. Mr. Rebrov, Russia, through the state-owned corporation Rosatom, is an essential and highly successful global player in the field of nuclear energy, with an impressive number of projects under construction in Russia and outside Russia, significant development efforts not only on Generation 3 PWRs, but also in SMRs and Generation 4 fast breeder reactors and technologies, aiming at closing the fuel cycle. We would like to hear from you, that you share with us some of the secrets of this success, with clearly a focus on the financing aspects. So we would like to understand all these developments represent a huge investment that is necessary to develop them and construct all these power plants, all these projects. So how are these investments in nuclear projects in Russia and abroad, outside Russia, financed? How are you organizing the risk sharing? How do you structure these projects? And how do you manage the significant time gap that we have between the investment and the return? I mean the first revenues that are generated by these projects, which is a key difficulty we are facing in financing large new build projects. That will be one set of questions, and the other one, if you could touch upon your views on the need and opportunities for international cooperation in a context of the current context of increasing geopolitical tensions in the world. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Do you hear? Do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Dear dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this European distinguished platform for the share the experiences and opinions among the leaders of the global nuclear power industry. And thank you for these questions. They are very up to time. First of all, I'd like to say that indeed we are almost the only company implementing serial nuclear power plant construction globally with 17 large-scale units in the last 15 years connected to the grid, as well as the world's only floating nuclear power unit, which operates in the Arctic Ocean. Currently, we have overseas projects for construction of 24 large-scale units in implementation phase in 9 countries. We believe that the state support is crucial for the successful development of the nuclear industry in every country, and subsequent decarbonization of the energy sector. One of the drivers of our success, I would say, is the devoted support of nuclear industry by the Russian government. There is a specific governmental program for support of our industry, starting from year 2012 until 2027. The overall planned budget can reach and exceed 28 billion US dollars. And what is most important, Russian government sees the role of nuclear industry as a crucial instrument for development of our country, as well as decarbonization of the economy. Considering the substantial capital expenditures of our projects, the state support is indeed particularly important when we speak in the terms of the gap between the investment phase and the first revenue. Based on our experience, on the experience of our export projects, it might be managed by several different ways. And first of all, is the state export credits. Funding the customer state by a vendor state, which is Russia, especially this option is usually demanded by newcomer countries, pioneers in the nuclear industry in their premises. The construction using this fund is usually undertaken by means of EPC contract. We also use export financing. This means that we attract financing with the coverage by ECA's guarantees. We do the project financing, which means that we invest our own money and the money of investors in power generation, in the construction of nuclear power plants as equity stakeholders. And this format we call build, own, operate, or in brief, BOO. And of course, bank financing, loans by Russian banks, including as part of project financing. The capacity of Russian banking system is well enough to support our needs. We see that, and we believe that the demand for build, own, operate model is growing steadily, and this growth will continue in coming years, especially among the newcomer countries. This model implies construction, ownership, and the preparation of the facility by the project company, usually created by a vendor with a possible engagement of partners, both industrial and financial partners, and of course, including ones from the customer country. The project company may be registered as a sell the electricity to the national utility company or regulator in the host country. Signing of long-term power purchase agreement or guarantees the return of investment for the project company as well as the supply of the electricity for the host country. In terms of financing, we see two major aspects to deal with. How the owners and vendors share project risk, and how the banks treat the project on the basis of sustainable financing criteria. I understand that there were numerous discussions today about the sustainable financing. I will not open this topic again with very few words, but I will try to give more information about build-on period form. It's important to understand the advantages of build-on period form for host country. Basically, the country gets a turnkey, fully functional generating facility that guarantees stable carbon-free electricity supply for the decades ahead. Our current design implies at least 60 years of operation, with no significant investments made. For a customer country, this model also eliminates the risk related to the nuclear power plant financing, operation, maintenance, and future decommissioning. Such a model, among other things, is an additional guarantee of the facility quality, since the company from nuclear industry will also operate it in the future. The main question, as we see it, is power purchase agreement enough for the bankability of the project? Or should PPA be covered by a huge storing guarantee? We understand that, and I think it's natural that any build-on-operate project is in need of additional and huge financing. An additional important instrument for this is ECA financing. However, from our experience, we have to say that many expert agencies, especially European, often lack sufficient mechanisms for adequate risk measures measurement, or are limited by some political and some other restrictions. The only remedy that we hear from our colleagues from finance world is that we need such a storing guarantee. But this means that the whole country pays twice. First of all, the price, the price in power purchase agreement, and secondly, allocation of huge reserves in the balances for the storing guarantee. And even, which is mostly effective during operational phase, where almost all the project risks are already covered, extinct, and so on. This situation is further complicated by the absence of formalized recognition of the nuclear power plant's sustainability at the European Union level. As a part of sustainable development, I would say movement and all the measures that are included. In last September, almost a month ago, the Russian government had approved the criteria for the selection of green projects and initiatives in the field of sustainable development for concessional financing. So-called Russia's own national taxonomy. Among the green areas of energy, nuclear energy is separately and very profoundly designated. This step will be a major factor to support domestic nuclear power development in coming years and give a very important signal to Russian banks. Some other countries, as already was discussed this day, already adopted or are in the process of adoption of the similar principles with the same signals to the financing society. As a chief financial officer of Rosatom, I can tell you that the absence of nuclear in taxonomies is not only our problem as a general main key components for Russian design power unit in Europe are provided by our European partners. Information control component for our units come from European companies like Framatome and Siemens. Research projects in Finland, Turkey, and some other countries will be equipped with a fast-speed steam turbine of Arab design produced by General Electric Power, former Alstom Power. In fact, for each nuclear unit which we design and implement with participation of European partners, there may be up to 1 billion euros of revenues and value for the European companies. And such supplies become most commercially attractive for us as a vendor if they are supported by the European export credit agencies support. So managing these limitations, though adoption of clear criteria for EC financing of new nuclear projects is one of the most important things on which nuclear market should focus. This is our opinion. For the second part of your question regarding cooperation, from one side, we understand that there should be a very organized movement towards the decarbonization of the power generation, the decarbonization of countries' economies. And we should do it quite fast to understand the risk and the danger that we can see at the moment. It means a very huge investment and a large number of projects. At the same time, I understand that typical life cycle of nuclear plant is 10 years of construction, 60 or more years of operation, and furthermore we have the commissioning part, which can extend up to 50 or even more years. It means that no political turmoil can influence such a long cycle. All the political issues can be raised, but inevitably they will decrease from time to time. And this means that the partnership is a crucial thing to make sure all the projects are done in time and with the necessary quality. This is all told, and thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, I will be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much, Ilya, for your very interesting contribution, and I hope we will have time left in the end for a few questions. Now, Mr. Zhang Zhenhua, China will most likely have the world's largest nuclear fleet in the next decade. The size of your population, the pace of economic growth, and the need to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels requires extraordinary investments to be made in alternative low-carbon sources, nuclear and renewables. The pace of construction of new nuclear power plants in China is quite impressive. China cooperated with a number of countries in developing its nuclear industry and increasingly relies on its own domestic technologies, competing with the established nuclear players in the global market. We would like to hear from you, how do you achieve such extraordinary results with a focus on financing again and financing support mechanisms that are available to Chinese utilities? What is your company's and your country's long-term strategy for domestic development, but importantly also for export opportunities? And what are the available financing support mechanisms that you would provide to your export projects? And the last question would be the same as the one I asked Ilya. How do you view the need for and the opportunities for international cooperation in the context of growing geopolitical tensions. Thank you. The floor is yours. Yes, we can hear you. So far, we cannot see you. Yeah, now we can. Yes. Yes, we can see you. So please go ahead. Everything seems fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need to upload my presentation. Can you see it clear?
Not yet. I think it will come. Yeah, it's coming, I think. Unfortunately, we cannot see your presentation yet.
I'll try again.
Yes, try again. No? You must select the file that you wish to share on your desktop. Or we have the presentation here, so we can share it from here if you prefer.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Yes, we have the presentation on the screen here.
Okay, thank you. So my talk is the development of nuclear power in China. So I have 5 parts. Please skip. Yeah. Why China needs nuclear energy? I think this is another question, but just give some information. And the second part is development nuclear. The government set policy for the nuclear power. And the major part is part 3, the concern and the countermeasures. So we have a serious concern for the public, the safety, the economy, and also the public support. So how we take this countermeasures for this concern or this problem. And I have some idea for the economic improvement for further. And finally, the international cooperation. Please. Yeah, why China needs nuclear energy? I think China still is a developing country. The economic growth and also the living standard need this demand of energy. And the Chinese government have a target 1360. That means by 2030, the carbon emission will reach the peak. And by the 2060, the carbon emission is net zero. So China is facing the fossil energy separation, which will shut down many coal power. So this is there is much gap for the energy. And we all know that the new energy sources like the wind power and the photovoltaic power
Next, I think.
Next.
Yeah.
Next page. Yeah. So by this goal target, we should decrease the ratio of coal consumption to 50% or below by 2030. And by 2050, we need to increase the non-fossil consumption higher than 50%. So this is the energy behavior we should consider it. So part 2, Chinese government policy for the nuclear power. Russia experts say the China government also have a long-term policy for the nuclear energy. So for this coming 5 years, the target is 70 million kilowatt in operation and 40 million kilowatt under construction. And now China has 51 nuclear power in operation, nuclear power plant in operation, and the 19 units under construction. There's still some gap, so almost every year we need 6 to 8 units to be constructed. So you can see from the government paper, the Chinese policy is to actively and always develop nuclear power on the premise of ensuring safety and to build a new power system with clean energy as the majority. So please, next page. So the Chinese public has the same problem or same concern on nuclear energy, mainly on 3 parts: safety, economy, and public support. I think it is similar like in Europe. So for safety, Chinese government and also the industry make many efforts, especially for the operating plants after the Fukushima nuclear accident. We make many technical improvements. So later I have a slide to show you the performance of these operating units. And all the new build should reach the latest standard and also we call the 3rd generation. Actually, they practically eliminate of the large-scale radiation material release, or we can say no severe accidents in design. And China have very strict standard on their site selection. But this also will keep we can ensure the safety on their site. And for the building and construction, we use many new technology, also like the intelligent site, to keep the construction quality. And for the equipment, we have many requirements to the factory, especially the preferred list, negative list, nuclear class qualification for many factories to ensure the quality of the equipment. And I think very important for the nuclear power plant is the operation. So Chinese APP make many progress in operating performance improvement. So next, please. The second concern economy. Yeah, I know this is a challenging issue also in China because we we have the more strict standard, more facility or safety facility added. So, and also material cost increase. So the cost for economy is always a problem. So we have done many optimized on design, and we have focused on design improvement further. And we focus on the construction period. We shorten the construction period. Many laser, which will be like use module construction. Also, we use the many technology like plug-in skill for the equipment. And for economy, I have some consideration for the nuclear energy multiple purpose. The nuclear energy is not only electricity producer, we should consider other use to make the supply before give more usage, more purpose for the society. Next, please. So, concern for the public support. Now, we have a problem on what we call the neighbor avoidance effect. So the people like the nuclear, but don't like nuclear around the hometown. They like to far away. So this is depend on the behavior of the nuclear, because there are some restrict zone around the MPP. This will affect regional development strategy, industrial upgrade, influence construction. So we have some practice. One is sure public, the safety is guaranteed or assured by excellent safety performance. And we have a very transparent communication with the local people. The local people can visit the site frequently and to know how we operate the plant. And people also clean air, so the ecological improvement, so some change on our mind. And I think the most important is the interest connection. We should give some interest to the local government, local people, local community. So the nuclear power plant or the owner of the investment support the APP for the employment, for the school funding. We have some mechanism to fund the grammar school, the middle school around the APP. And also we have some contribute to the community build. And around the APP, the locals community has for industry provide some product to the APP. So I think the interest to the local people is very important. And also we do some publicity. The government, regulator, corporation, association, and even the APP make many efforts to the public to show the safety, show the benefit of the nuclear, and also we have no chance, I think, to have an alternative resources. China is not an issue of the resources. So this is some background. So next, please. scope. So this shows that the Chinese operating plans, nuclear operating plans, make many efforts on the safety operation. Next. And part 4, for economic, I think not only to reduce the cost of the construction, we should consider the nuclear age by many ways. In China, we develop not only a commercial reactor, we are now doing much work efforts on the SMR, on the high temperature gas reactor, and also the low temperature reactor, like a swimming pool reactor, to provide the heat for the resident. So this is our consideration to align the nuclear age to replace the traditional industry focal the fossil plant to provide steam to the petrol or chemical industry, and to provide the heat to the residents, to provide the public product for the medical or the detecting machine. So this is which enlarge the nuclear energy environment. So please next. So we make integrate solution combined together with this unique feature for the big reactor, small reactor, and also high temperature, low temperature. To each site, each province, each region to provide this solution. And also we are considered to make the hydrogen age by if some nuclear base have more energy, the electricity cannot be sent out by the grid. We can make other energy to transfer. So last, next please. For the, please, next. So for the international cooperation, we are always like to work with you, all the nuclear family, to build safe, economic, competitive nuclear age supply chain, and to improve global environment and to against the climate change. So I think by the time limit, I just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zhenghua, for your presentation. We are, I think, running out of time, so let me continue to our last presenter, John Kotek. So, John, is he with us? Is John with us? Yes. John, after many years of hesitation and difficulties faced in the deployment of Generation 3 reactors in the United States, falling competitiveness of nuclear generations against historically cheap gas prices, we observe a very clear policy shift in favor of nuclear power with the new administration, making climate action a top priority policy. We have recently seen state support provided to operating nuclear power plants to allow extended operation in order to take into account their climate benefits. And of course, we see multiple public initiatives to accelerate the development of advanced reactor technologies and SMRs. So I would have four questions on four distinct aspects of providing support to nuclear power plants. The first one is related to long-term operation and the support to existing nuclear power plants, operating nuclear power plants. So what is done at the federal level or at the state level in order to allow their long-term operation and to take full benefit from the low carbon generation, knowing that it has been recognized that extending the lifetime of nuclear power is the lowest cost option for generating reliable, dispatchable, low carbon electricity. The second question is related to approaches to financing of large nuclear new build projects in the United States. So I don't know if there will be any after Vogel, but what are the support mechanisms available in terms of loan guarantees? What is the role of private and public investors, and how is let's say, is there any carbon pricing mechanism to be considered, and so on. The next question is a similar one, but related to your export projects. So what is the government providing here to support your US vendors in terms of loans and guarantees? What is the role of development banks, export credit agencies, and how do you set up the relationship with the host countries, the host governments, the local companies? How do you intend to localize the supply chain? So as the third one and the last one is related to the advanced technologies. So what are the support mechanisms that are being provided to the development of advanced technologies and SMRs in terms of public funding for R&D, but also new licensing approaches that will be necessary, the support of demonstration projects, and let's say innovative or new financing mechanisms that would be adapted to SMRs. So that's it. These are the four questions. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Great questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all. I thought I would maybe hit all of those questions as part of an overview of how things have changed so markedly in the U.S. over the last 10 years or so as it pertains to the outlook for nuclear power. You've certainly heard that we have seen some reactors close in recent years in the U.S., principally due to very low natural gas prices and the financial pressures that those have placed on plants with low revenues. Yet we still have 20% of our electricity in the United States coming from nuclear. We're seeing utilities that operate those plants committing to retaining most, if not all, that generation. We've got a lot of innovation underway in the U.S., and we've got a growing interest in building new nuclear. So all told, there is a significantly improved outlook for new nuclear power in the United States. The reasons for this improved outlook are, of course, are manifold, but I think it does stem first and foremost from climate concerns. And I'm pleased to note that we have civil society, or we call NGO groups here in the United States who I would say are doing the math and have looked at what it's really going to take to get to not just an affordable, reliable, decarbonized electric grid, but to go beyond and actually deeply decarbonize the broader energy economy. And many, not all certainly, but many of these NGOs have concluded that existing nuclear is essential to retain, and new nuclear can play a very important role. That has really influenced discussions, particularly on the political left, the Democratic Party here in the United States, which used to, I would say, have a fair number of members who were skeptical about nuclear. We're seeing much wider embrace of nuclear energy now across the political spectrum. I will say that in addition to the work by our NGOs and civil society groups, we've had many of our well-respected universities with clean energy programs that have really underscored the findings and the views of these NGO groups that say there really is a very high value for having what we call firm zero carbon generation available on the grid to support a growing share of wind, solar, and storage. And then finally, to comments made earlier and by both of my colleagues, there is a growing recognition of the role that nuclear can play in decarbonizing beyond the electric grid. And frankly, when you look at the low carbon options that are available, they are fewer than trying to just to get to decarbonize electricity. And so all of these things have informed a conversation and a changing set of policies across the U.S. We've first seen that take hold in our states. We've now seen several of our state governments enact policies that take us from where we've been the first 15, 20 years of this century with a focus on renewable portfolio standards and evolving those to clean energy standards. In most cases, 100% clean energy standards by mid-century or sooner. That move has informed, or has been based in large part on an understanding that renewables are not going to be enough to do the job, or at least do it well, do it affordably. That we're going to want to have that firm low carbon generation available to complement intermittent technologies, even if we get to very large dispatch of storage technology. So we've seen these state policies go into place. Those have started to create a demand pull for new nuclear. And certainly a recognition of the importance of existing nuclear. We're also seeing major energy consumers in the U.S. making very public and very significant decarbonization commitments. And what that's done is it's created a lot more pressure on both our state and federal governments, but also on our utilities, the companies that provide the electricity to these consumers, and it's causing them to focus more and more on how do they decarbonize the product that they deliver to these major consumers. And as our utilities have looked at what it's going to take to get there, their findings very much are consistent with what I described earlier as the doing the math that we've seen with our NGOs and with our universities. They have found that keeping today's nuclear operating is the lowest cost way of keeping carbon off the grid, and that there can be a huge value in having new nuclear on the system. As the professor mentioned yesterday about levelized cost of electricity as being an incomplete criterion, our utilities have found that to be exactly true, and that when you start looking at the overall systems costs of adding intermittent generation onto the grid, that can drive costs up very, very high, particularly as you get close to 100% carbon free. And so the utilities have an awareness that to get to a lower overall system cost and greater reliability at that fully decarbonized grid is going to require having a significant share of firm low carbon generation on the grid, and that starts with keeping the nuclear that we have today and can very much include new nuclear going forward. One comment I should make regarding the outlook for today's nuclear plants in the U.S. As was mentioned yesterday, I think Dr. Helm talked about the U.S. rate of return regulation that we have in roughly half of our electricity markets. In places where our utilities, say big companies like Duke and Dominion, you may have heard of, in the states where they operate, where they have state guaranteed rates of return and very firm commitments to keeping today's nuclear reactors in operation. So, for example, Duke operates 11 reactors in our states of North and South Carolina. They have declared their commitment to pursue what we call subsequent license renewal. So that's the license extension for all 11 of their reactors. Dominion has done the same thing with all 4 of their reactors. So the list goes on. We have seen federal support for this license renewal activity. There have been federal programs through our U.S. Department of Energy that have worked with the industry to form the technical basis that's needed to convince our nuclear safety regulator, our nuclear regulatory commission, of the acceptability of operating these plants out to 60 or 80 years. And so as a result, nearly every reactor we have is licensed to operate to 60 years, and at least a half a dozen have already been approved to go to 80 years, and many more are in review right now. Conversely, outside of those rate-regulated states where you have these competitive electricity markets, we have seen some plant closures. And we have seen state governments have to step up, absent a federal price on carbon or any other clean energy standard or any other federal policy that would provide a strong incentive to keep today's nuclear plants operating. So you've seen our states of Illinois, New York, and New Jersey, Connecticut, enact policies to provide additional revenue to the nuclear plant operators to ensure that those plants don't close prematurely. By and large, those policies have been based on the carbon savings that come from having nuclear on the grid. To be sure, there was also a state-level interest in preserving the long-term, well-paying jobs that those plants provide and provide in communities that tend to be away from big cities and have historically had fewer opportunities for that type of employment. So it's been multifaceted in terms of the reasons why the states have stepped up, but they have in fact stepped up awaiting federal action. But we're now starting to see more in the way of federal support. We have over several years. It really started with an interest, a bipartisan interest in advanced nuclear reactor technology, so the so-called Generation 4 technology that can offer improvements in safety, operational performance, and other factors. But it's really taken hold here over the last couple of years. In particular, our President Biden, when he was campaigning for president, he was the first Democratic nominee for president, I think going back to the 1970s, to include nuclear energy in his energy policy, in his platform. President Biden then worked with the more, we call them progressive, the further left wing of the party to develop consensus positions on things like clean energy, and nuclear energy emerged from that set of negotiations as part of the policy that the Democratic Party decided to rally behind. And so we saw strong support for nuclear during the Biden campaign. We've seen that continue as the Biden-Harris administration has taken office. We've seen strong requests for R&D funding, for example, as was alluded to yesterday, well north of $1.5 billion US annually going into our nuclear energy R&D program. We've seen very senior members of the President's administration making supportive statements about both today's nuclear and next generation nuclear, driven principally by carbon considerations, but also by the importance again of those long-term well-paying jobs. And organized labor is a very important part of the President's constituency. As our Hungarian colleague said this morning, the well-paying long-term jobs that nuclear offers are just something that our labor unions place a very high priority. They look at other clean energy technologies and they see maybe short-term construction or installation jobs, but not a lot of long-term jobs. Nuclear plants, by virtue of their very long lifetime, are the types of facilities you can build a community with. And you can have multiple generations of people working at the same facility. We see that here in the U.S. all the time. It's one of the reasons that the communities that have nuclear in the U.S. are most interested in having more. Most recently here in the US, and looking at our Congress, we've seen two major bills that really evidence this support for nuclear. So getting to your question about support for innovation, for example, there is a piece of legislation called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill that was negotiated by our Democratic and Republican parties that includes both a credit program to keep existing nuclear plants running and about $2.5 billion of appropriations for what we call our Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. That's the effort to demonstrate both the Natrium liquid metal reactor and the X-energy gas reactor this decade. We also have seen in just the Democrat-only bill, we call it the Reconciliation Bill. It's this $3.5 trillion bill you may have heard about. Even that bill being written just by the Democrats includes a production tax credit to keep existing nuclear in operation. It also includes funding for things like the versatile test reactor, or next generation fast spectrum test reactor from the intended bill. So a lot of support for both the existing fleet and for innovation in legislation that's being advanced on a bipartisan basis. I should also mention that this reconciliation bill also includes something called a Clean Electricity Performance Plan. That would be our version of a clean electricity standard, but written in a way that it can get through a particular process that we have to be followed in our Congress. That would get us to about 8% carbon-free generation by about 2030 on our grid, which could be very helpful to existing nuclear, maybe less so for new build. But there is interest in within our utility sector in exploring new build. We are seeing some policies under consideration that would help enable that new build. So, to your question about support for new build, there is an existing production tax credit for a limited amount of new nuclear in the U.S. that is on the books. We're encouraging Congress to expand that. It doesn't provide the same strong incentives we've seen, say, for wind and solar in the United States, and we do need to level that playing field. We also have things like the Department of Energy Loan Program Office, which, for example, has loaned north of $10 billion for the Vogtle plant, which is under construction in Georgia right now. So there are a range of federal incentives in place that we think can be brought to bear to create new demand pull for nuclear in the same way that we've successfully created demand pull for wind and solar in the United States. One last thing I should talk about in terms of public support for nuclear in the U.S. While public opinion polling doesn't show the same strength of bipartisan support for new nuclear and existing nuclear as we see in our Congress, we do see very strong support for nuclear in the communities that currently host those plants. Mm-hmm. And as the people in this meeting know, nuclear facilities are very large. They put out a lot of electricity. In the U.S., nuclear plants represent 1% of our total number of power plants, get to 20% of our electricity. The point being, we don't need to be able to build them everywhere. We need to have a sufficient number of communities who welcome new nuclear build for nuclear to make an even bigger dent in cleaning our electric grid, and we enjoy support very broadly. Again, particularly in communities that value those long-term, well-paying jobs. That's causing communities that currently host coal plants in the U.S. that are facing closure to express interest in converting those coal facilities to SMRs or other nuclear facilities so that they can retain the well-paying long-term jobs. And then finally, in the interest of time, I'll just close with a response to your question about exports. Our government has consistently shown support, whether it's Republican or Democrat administration, for our nuclear technology sector. They understand the importance, the value of a strong civil nuclear export sector. We have things like our Export-Import Bank, which can provide financing, our Trade Development Agency, which, for example, has funded what we call a FEED study looking at deployment of nuclear in Poland and some other European countries got our U.S. Development Finance Corporation, and then we've got the strength of U.S. government advocates. We've seen our government consistently working with existing or potential future partner countries to advocate for U.S. senators, and we're finding, as you've seen in the press recently, increasing interest, whether it's in Central Europe or Asia or beyond, in working with the U.S. to bring new U.S. technologies to market. Certainly, we have work yet to do. The supportive policies I mentioned earlier as being in the bipartisan infrastructure bill or the reconciliation bill, that's not across the finish line yet. We need to get those passed. We do need to continue to sustain for public support. We need to ensure that policymakers and the public understand that nuclear brings a value to our grid that makes it worth what might be a little extra cost. And then, of course, our repository, our nuclear waste program is stuck, and so that needs to be unstuck and get moving again and provide a pathway to responsible management back into the fuel cycle. But big picture, things are looking significantly better here in the U.S. It's an exciting time to be in the U.S. nuclear energy industry. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John. I mean, it was quite impressive. I didn't really manage to take the notes of all the support mechanisms that you were listing, and I think that this just shows the huge difference in a way that we wanted to show and to demonstrate, and probably Claude shows me that we don't have time for further discussions or questions and answers, but I think in general the key message clearly is that Europe is lagging behind, significantly behind, and that if Europe wants to continue to be a significant player in the nuclear sector in the global framework, it definitely needs to change its approach and its policy, and this should be done quickly, because so far we have been losing ground, and in order to let's say get to a level playing field, but this time with the other actors in the global nuclear market, we definitely need to change things and the attitude to nuclear power in Europe. Thank you very much to all three of you, Ilya, Zhang, and John. Sorry for the late start. We had to keep you waiting, and I will then stop here. No questions, right? Claude says no, so no questions. Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate.
Bien, vous ne m'en voudrez pas pour la discussion, ça aurait relancé trop de choses, il y a eu beaucoup de choses dites par les trois d'ailleurs, avec des modèles très différents, entre parenthèses. Hein. Et donc, je vous invite à rejoindre le buffet et de nous retrouver ici dans la salle à 2h30. Alors, ça vous laisse quand même une petite heure, c'est pas mal, on n'a quand même pas trop perdu de temps. Et merci à Yann, parce que vraiment, c'était très important de les entendre, et comme tu dis, le but du jeu a été atteint. La différence a été faite. Merci.